Welcome to Money, Money, Money. I'm Sumera Abdi. Entrepreneurship has a reputation of being an edgy, youthful business and is often measured by the tales of Mark Zuckerberg, Steve Jobs and Bill Gates who dropped out of college to make their fortunes. What about those who actually didn't have a blinding insight at 20? I mean, is there any hope for them? LATHA Venkatesh joins me this week to ponder over exactly this, and also with us we have Hrishikesh, Parandekar, CEO of Ambit Private Wealth, who's actually going to be detailing the key areas of money management for everyone who's deciding to take the plunge mid-career or as a startup. And Bharat Ahirwar, founder of GetMyPN.com, now called Rush, also joins in to bring his perspective as an entrepreneur. So welcome everybody. I'm so happy to see a full house here. But before I get to actually this topic, I want to tell everyone why LATHA is here, and that's because LATHA and Rishi actually go back a long way. Is that
yes,
right?
Yes, that's true. This is 1993 when I first read, I think, a reference to Hrishikesh getting top dollar picked up from IIM by McKinsey, and it was a princely 3.83 lakhs, if I remember right.
3.2, but
okay,
was princely in those days.
Adjusted for inflation, even then not.
Yes, and then we travelled from New Bombay to town on several occasions because that's the distance we had to cover. So Hrishikesh was always the star, and I stood or sat on the sidelines and watched his work.
I'm sure I gave up my seat a few times for you.
All right, so you broke the ceiling at that time, and now we have a different set of people who are breaking the ceilings, and which is the startup guys, and which is why we have Bharat here with us. So Bharat, how has your experience been? Did you actually actively manage your personal finances before you took the plunge?
Yes, I would say yes. And, I think finance plays a major part in terms of whether you're working or whether you're starting a business. And touch wood, I had a little bit of sense. I'm not that great at that, but I think a little bit worked, and that's helped me a long way.
So you had some savings because you had been working?
Yes.
Okay, well, what would your advice be to those who start off now in their mid-career, change of job? My own fear would be that, and Hrishikesh, correct me if I'm wrong, we assume that, okay, I need 50,000 per month for my monthly expenses. In 3 years, that is woefully inadequate. So would you say that one of the big things that you have to factor in is a 10% compounded annual growth in terms of monthly expenses before you start?
I guess from a purely inflation perspective, yes, is the sort of short answer. But I think what often you have to think about as an entrepreneur is what are your real expenses? Because you're obviously making a leap of faith. And so what you are used to, especially for mid-career people, right? And so Bharat happens to be a bit younger than us. but for mid-career people who are basically in their 30s or 40s, get used to a certain lifestyle. But when you start to think about entrepreneurship, you really have to reevaluate what is it that you really need to live on and what is important and what is not. And that's the sort of base you want to be able to build it off. It is a set of compromises, right, which are not to be lightly made. But I think once you arrive at that number, then you have obviously have to factor in sort of what inflation will do to the expense and how much of a pot you need to build out. But in my experience, oftentimes people are able to live on much less than what they're used to in a sort of mid-career situation, and that's kind of the math people go through. And so it may not be a 50 number; it could be a 50 is probably a sensible number in a Mumbai context, but it could be a different number. But the point is, you really reevaluate your expenses before you make the leap.
Hrishikesh, what should be the checklist of things you should do before a mid-career jump? I mean, unlike Bharat's case.
Right, and so, well, this is going to be a fairly generic sort of hygiene list because everyone's risk appetite is very different, and obviously people make different choices. But at the very base case level, one is to be clear, especially if one has a set of responsibilities which comes along with age and with family and with situation of that sort. Right, so just making sure basic things like you're not under any debt burden. Right now, whether that means I'm not counting the home loan part, but everything else in terms of the other sort of thing has to be clear. The thing which is not financial but is equally important is to make sure one has a very clear understanding with the spouse about what it means to be doing this, right? Because that is a very sort of dramatic change in what's happened. Besides that, I think what is also important to evaluate is what is the genuine risk? Because if 3 years out, if things don't work, do you really have the ability to go back into the job market or not? Is a very important consideration, right? Because if you're going down a path which basically makes you sort of harder to get back into corporate life, that is a different perspective from things. If you do things and don't work and you can go back. So that also changes how you evaluate what sort of risk you want to be able to, what sort of protection and preparation you want to have before you take the leap.
That's a good point actually you raised, because Bharat has been through exactly that. So you had a venture which didn't do so well earlier on.
Yeah.
You decided not to go back to your corporate life and actually start up another venture altogether. So how did your personal life or your money management actually be managed at this?
So, all the checklist was right, in fact. So I got lucky, I would say. While I started working early, I managed to have some savings. My sister got married at the right time, and I had zero responsibilities. So no house loan, nothing. I never liked credit card. My mom always told me no credit card, so there's no credit card till date.
You're too good to be true.
Yeah, so there's no credit card on me. So I had all the money saved, and I would, since I was not looking at a startup life, I had kept that money to probably buy an expensive watch. But then life moved on. I realized that I need to do something else, something which is more meaningful. And my first venture, I actually used all that money. And I remember living, I think my monthly expense was not more than 10,000. I remember my phone bill was 1,500 rupees. I would carry my travel at about a railway pass of 300 rupees, which is the local pass. And rest all would be either food, coffee, or meeting expense. And I had cut down on my social life, no other fancy expense, no buying clothes and going to bars. So I moved from that and did the first venture, and then everything failed. I remember I had only 20,000 rupees, and I didn't want to go back to a corporate job. I said, no, like I know what I'm doing, and it just needs a little tweak.
Is it not a difficult thing now, say if a person is 40, to also manage the emotional life? Because the family is used to probably a holiday. So do you have to, therefore, if you are 40 or 45, put away a little more before you take the risk?
I agree, because you have spouse, you have kids. Just because you've decided to become an entrepreneur doesn't mean they have to kill themselves. And that's where you have to pre-plan, and you have to, of course, talk to your spouse. There's some sensible calls you have to take. Of course, there has to be a family support when you're married, because it becomes just not your family, it's the other side of the family too who's looking at you. Okay, what is the son-in-law up to now?
Okay, I just wanted to tell you, Bharat, that far from taking the wife on board, in several startup cases I know, wife is the insurance. Because she had a salary job, the startup could start up.
I agree, yes.
All right, so what we'll do now is let's take a very quick break. We'll come back in a bit. We'll talk a little bit more about how to manage the liquidity during this time, and also how to ring-fence your personal assets when you're starting out as an entrepreneur. All of that is lined up. Stay tuned to Money, Money, Money.